Hello and welcome to Converge 2020, the biggest celebration of digital arts and innovation in Zimbabwe, showcasing the best in animation, augmented reality, comic art, gaming, virtual reality, visual effects, film, and digital media in the country. This is the 6th edition of the annual event, and this year it's all happening online. My name is Bill Masuku, and I am your host today. I'm a comic book artist and writer based in Harare, Zimbabwe. Today, I have a very special guest, one of the founders of Comexposed, who has a CV far too long to list, and I think he can do a better job of introducing himself. I don't want to misstep on all of his accolades and successes. Tino, please, welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me. Not that you have a choice, but
I don't.
Good to be here. Thanks for the intro there, Bill. It's good to be here for yet another Comexposed. It's been many, many, many years. We've gone through a lot and we're still here. 2020, it didn't kill us. So we're good to go and I'm excited about that. Yeah, well, my name is Tinodiwa Zambe Makoni. I'm a comic book artist, illustrator, animator, and many, many other things that I do on the side. I've got my own company, CCX Comics, and also I am co-founder, along with Eugene, of Comexposed, which you're watching right now. So I guess that's enough of an intro. That's a good enough intro.
Is it? Is it really?
I don't know. I don't know what else people need to know.
Listen, you know, you started making comics. You started making what? You started making comics a very, very, very long time ago. You are one of the most seasoned veterans of the country, providing not just a senior role, but a leading force in terms of your production quality and your different roles, as you've mentioned, in terms of animation, comic books, and organizational skills in terms of hosting these events. Again, I don't want to just like list off your accolades. I think it would be better if you just gave us a little presentation, Yana, you know? You got something prepared?
Well, I've spoken a lot over the years, so I guess I'll say what I say, which is more or less my story. I hope that usually from my story that people can learn something or catch something or get a better idea of how everything happened. So I guess I'll go with that. I mean, it's most people's story, but with a bit of flavor from me. So that's good.
We love your flavor. Let's hear more from you. Take it away, please, Tino.
All right. So my story begins in Zimbabwe, of course, just after independence and in the glorious early days of Zimbabwe and Africa finding itself and kind of figuring itself out. Everything was new, everything was coming in, and we were learning to be part of the world, but under new terms. So I didn't know this, of course. I was a kid. I was really young, and my journey of finding myself, I guess, kind of began at more or less the same time. So you could say, well, this is me. Pretty young, impressionable, handsome. And if you can't tell from the big eyes and the scar on the lower left side, you could tell that I was a very, very obedient child. And maybe the world's most well-behaved child, if I may say so myself. 4 p.m. cartoons were my lifeblood. And it was there that I got my dose of motivation, of fire, of vigor. Thanks to local TV and my half American best friends, I got a lot of international media coming in and stuff that many other people weren't able to see themselves. And that is where I got my first real taste of comic books and stuff like that. So, of course, I got into Samurai Pizza Cats, Sonic the Hedgehog, DuckTales, Visionaries, Spiral Zone, Danger Mouse, Darkwing Duck, Double Dragons, Cops, now that was a good show, Robotech, Brave Star, Widget the World Watcher, and so many more. All of those were the ones that were the basis of what I now do and were the bedrock of everything. I then created things like Bio Bunny, and soon after that, in grade 7, I created my all-time favorite, Captain Wolf. He was a superhero dog. Forgive the naming conventions. I was a kid. So, I mean, it's not like I was coming up with anything brilliant at the time. He was a superhero dog, and he was full of all the things I love, which are robots, cool stuff, transforming cars, transforming jets. He was just all of that bottled into one awesomeness. Awesome thing. Fine. This was after I created Bio Bunny. Bio Bunny was my trial run. He was pretty cool as well. He's Bio Bunny, you're not forgotten. But Captain Wolf was my guy, right? And all of this happened because me and my best friend, we began competing with each other. He would make some characters, and then I'll be like, oh snap, I need to make some characters. And we did that back and forth, and I'll do my comic, you do his comic. And I have to say, that competition, that kind of competing with each other is incredibly healthy. You need to have that healthy level of competition between yourselves and other people. Yeah, so I created Captain Wolf, and I was blazing with that, having a gas, doing that sort of thing. I did my first issue. Obviously, I didn't have cool, amazing technology or anything like that. So it was literally A4 bond paper, my pencils, my pens, and I was just drawing in there. And then to make it double-sided, I just stuck 2 pages back to back. That's the technology we had when you begin. So great fun with that. So looking back though, I guess I was creating the world as I saw it with my eyes at that time. As young people do, you just create what you're seeing around yourself. I absorbed without restraint. And as the adage goes, children do what you do, not what you say. So my artwork betrayed the world I lived in, and it also showed sort of my own growing identity crisis, which I'll come back to later. So fast forward, and I was now in high school, right? And I guess people like to make sure that you actually are saying what you're saying. So can I? Are you seeing my screen there? Yeah, that's my screen. So I was in high school, right? And I think I had gotten, just a bit better looking there. I was improving. I was steadily getting there. And obviously my mindset and everything had changed. I was now thinking about a lot of other things. I was no longer thinking that something like Captain Wolf was going to work as a comic book title that was going to be, internationally known. You can't be saying, there's that guy, he's like 40 years old and he created Captain Wolf. So I just, I decided to work with the times. I shortened his name and I turned it to CW, which was a bit more cool, a bit edgier. And by that time, I was getting into things like the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, the Avengers, all those other really, really awesome stories. And so my stories were also evolving along with that. I then realized around that time that the best stories are the stories that come from your own experiences, the stories that come from the life that you yourself have lived. So I guess if someone wants a point in that area, the one thing is that you should always, I guess, accept your unique life experiences, accept the thing that comes from you, accept your own mess, if you want to call it that, which is what I did. And soon after that, realizing that I wanted to tell stories that come from me, I then created what is called Titan God. Wow, I don't know, Bill, did I ever tell you about Titan God? It's a really cool story.
Yeah, it's not about me. Like, I know all about this stuff. It's not. This is for people who may or may not know you, or know you but don't know your work. That delineation is sometimes a tricky thing, and this has been very insightful so far. So don't let me stop you about like whether I know Titan God or not. Tell us about Titan God. I'm here for it.
All right, so I created Titan God, right, which was this exciting brand new idea that I had around that time, following the story of these young, awesome teenagers living in this post-apocalyptic present where the entire adult population had been wiped out, leaving just young, superpowered kids. And well, that's Titan God in a nutshell, made by me. But the one weird thing that I started to realize around the time as I was making these stories is that as much as I made cool stories like this, like Titan Core, you'd see someone like myself, and then you'd see like the main character that I make for my comics, in this case, Terry Highgate, looked, well, completely different from me. As much as I was telling these stories, I was beginning to realize more and more that I myself was not in my stories. But it didn't click that well at that time, mostly because all my friends and family and everybody around me were like crazy into it. This was not X-Men. This was not anything they'd seen. Here's this cool team with Isogen, Black Diamond, Isomer, Electro, all these really cool characters and stuff like that. And no, everyone missed kind of what was happening in the background. But hey, no harm, no foul. You're growing in your career. This is where you're going. So the whole team of superheroes consisted of 8 members, only 2 of which were actually Black. And it took place in a far, far, far away land of New York, where I myself had never been. Later, of course, I would wonder why, when given the opportunity to tell any fantasy story, a young African boy from Zimbabwe would tell the story of a young white boy from New York, a place I'd never been and where I'd never experienced anything. If you asked me at the time, though, I would swear that I was being truly reflective of myself. Bit of a problem. Anyway, the comic did obey the rules of what was at that time cool, or really, and the rules of cool, I guess, are actually anything separate and different from yourself that piques the interest and all of that of anybody else. So none of my friends noticed. And Titan Core had, in fact, well, what am I saying? At that time, I can appreciate why my friends did not notice, because they had never seen a Black superhero. Not in its entirety, never at all. Just they never imagined the idea of a prominent Black superhero or a prominent Black superhero team. There were 1 or 2 people. Black Panther wasn't even there at that time for us. There were 1 or 2 people. I mean, there was Blank Man or Meteor Man, who very few people can remember. Those were just comedy superheroes. Those weren't even legit proper heroes.
You're exposing our age. You're exposing our age.
I've been in the game for a long time, a long time. So it was so far-fetched, it was very hard to conceive. And the truth of the matter is, it was hard to conceive even for me, the creator of the art itself. Either way, the positive feedback helped Titan Core become the first comic book I commercially sold. I managed to convince my dad to give me a little bit of money, and I went to my aunt. He helped me print black and white at Copy World. Shout out to Copy World. They may never remember me, but we made black and white copies of this thing. I went to my aunt's pharmacy, we put it in there, and to my surprise, because I didn't even tell her like to give me money for this thing, I just wanted to see it move. She actually sold it, and it actually moved. And I was like, hey, snap, I can actually sell comic books that I write. It reminded me that I have what it takes. The situation reinforced what my young mind already knew, which were that the rules of cool were other of me, not me, not me. The rules of cool were not me. If I wanted to make something that sell, it needed to look like the X-Men. It needed to be like Superman. It needed to have the hint of the Avengers. It needed to be more like Star Trek or more like Star Wars. It needed to be anything but me. And I guess a lot of artists kind of learn that lesson without realizing it from what they're doing. So this was sort of a bias that I guess it was hardwired in me. It's a systemic bias, a bias in the media that's very systemic, that's kind of hardwired into us as people. So the media carried a subtle subtext that there were less people like me in the world and in the universe. I mean, haven't you ever wondered how like Star Trek is supposed to be about a future where everybody is kind of unified and joined, and yet for some bizarre reason, most of the crew is still mostly white. They still travel the universe, and it's still mostly. Shout out to Star Trek, because Gene Roddenberry tried. Star Wars, that's terrible, guys. Furthest part in the universe, there's still no Black people. It boggles the mind. It makes no sense. It's same with Avengers, with the X-Men. The X-Men had Storm, and that was it. Really. Even their bad guys couldn't be black. It was just that. That was yeah, crazy, isn't it? We just were not there in any way. In Avengers, terrible. The last movies, terrible. Up until like Age of Ultron, really all the black guys were sidekicks. There was no main person. It's just a lot of things reinforce this bias in the media, and remind you that, at least in the case of us in Africa, let me speak for my fellow Africans. Um, One thing we always seeing, it reminds us that we're always being saved. We're never doing the saving. And that's why the aliens always go to New York, they always go to America. Africa is always this place that happened to be destroyed and demolished and, I don't know, needs relief. The heroes don't even bother having like a smaller base here until, I don't know, it's just, we're always being saved, we're never saving. So those sort of things kind of got embedded within me. And I guess at the time I didn't quite realize it, but it was happening. So in a nutshell, what that did without doing so intentionally was it robbed me of the agency of my own identity in media. That's what the media did. It robbed me kind of of my agency. So let's skip ahead. And I left the country, as many people try to do, not always the best idea, but I did it. Left the country and I went to another country and I studied what I'd always wanted to study, which was animation. And I did my bachelor's degree there in Australia. And it was one of the most amazing experiences being around equally weird, crazy people. So if you're a person out there who wants to kind of learn this business and get into it, it is very cool to be around weird people. Your mind explodes. Very, very good for creativity. And it cemented my desire to come back to Africa to actually help other people like myself who had the same passion kind of get into this industry. I wanted to then not just do the work out there, but I wanted to establish a Marvel Comics here. I wanted to establish a Disney here. I wanted that sort of thing to be here for everybody else and for myself. I wanted to be at home. It's a better place to be. So after quite some time, I came back and I got to work on all my all-time favorites, created a brand new title called The Gift, as well as another title called Gundog. So this is The Gift, The Gift. Really, really fun, awesome story. And it was a story about a young kid who had left the country and was coming back to a brand new Zimbabwe. They didn't understand it. They were learning all their powers and all of that. But the crazy thing about The Gift was, even after all of that, and I got to tell this amazing story, sadly, when The Gift finally came out, and I guess I need to show it, The Gift looked like this. And yeah, I guess I look like this. So, I mean, there's a slight resemblance, a slight one, but.
No, don't lie to us. No.
Hey, it's in the hair, it's in the hair. But so even with all my thinking and everything, it still hadn't quite hit home. It still hadn't resonated. So his name was Terry Highgate. He was really cool, awesome powers and everything, but I still wasn't in my own stories. Somewhere in production, I guess that's when it happened. I don't know if it was the 100% local content that the government mandated upon broadcasters. I don't know if it was the upsurge in Nigerian movies that were like on every street corner. I don't know if it was my church and the emphasis it had on reevaluating your ideologies. Somewhere in all of that, I really, really, really sat down and asked myself why my stories may reflect my heart, but they do not reflect my identity. In that moment, it was as if like I'd eaten the red pill and I saw it like literally all around me. It wasn't just me, it was the whole nation, and it was all of media. I saw that it wasn't enough to just give kids heroes that they could aspire to be like. I had to give them heroes that they could actually, literally become. As long as they looked at the heroes and the role models that they had out there, and subconsciously, at a fundamental level, they could see that they could not literally be them. They would always be fighting against themselves, and they would never have the agency to actually transform the world. So this is something that I began to realize at that time, and it heavily impacted all the work that I was doing. So you may wonder what other creators bore ideas for their identity and life experiences. First for me, for like, what can I say? First creators who really, really put their identity in modern artwork that I really, really enjoyed were people like Neil Blomkamp, who did the whole District 9 thing, and Chappie, and all that sort of stuff. That stuff really motivated me and helped me, like, say, or reinforce my idea to put myself more in my art. So it wasn't just me who was having this revelation. It was lots of other people across the continent. So I dug deep. I began to research. I had to accept my own stuff, and I brought all my accumulated knowledge to bear. I realized that your initial idea is not always the most polished one, no matter how good you think it is at first, and it's probably not your best. So people buy quality, not just quantity. So the rich, dense ideas that I had, I then kind of amalgamated them into something completely brand new. I redid The Gift, and this time his name was Maxwell Musonza. He didn't come from overseas. He moved from Gweru to Harare. I also looked at my lifelong character, Captain Wolf, CW, and I realized something else about him as well. You know how like characters like Sonic and all these other characters, whenever they draw the flesh part of the characters, it's always a particular color. Yeah, I then thought that was also a subconscious thing that was happening. And this time I made him a very Zimbabwean dog, very proud. He said, no, I'm not even going to apologize, even when it comes to my anthropomorphic characters. And I renamed him and called him Gundog. So he became my idea of an African futuristic dog rather than just a futuristic dog. So I published my first double issue. By the way, this is Gundog right here, Gundog. So I published my first issue. It went nationwide. It was really hard. I had to get some funding assistance from, funders, finances, family and friends. Family and friends, I love you. I'm still here. So I got a lot of those guys to plug in and really help. And we managed to get 2,700 copies distributed across the country. It was originally 3,000 copies. The first batch, we actually tried to self-distribute, like literally hand them out on the street to people. I got some good market feedback, such as parents do not like the name Gundog when they're selling to their kids. Who would have thunk it? Who would have thunk it? Anyway, it gave me another great source of feedback because people were able to then, not just at that moment, but years later, people would then comment and say that it was so awesome to read stories that showed places in Zimbabwe or had hints of local brands and all sorts of things like that. I mean, one of the best places the comic sold was actually in Chinoy, I think, which was just random to me. I didn't expect something like that. So it reached far and wide, and it helped people see something that I had taken for granted. So one of the points that I have to make with that is that it's good to just throw what you have out there. Don't always wait for its best version. Like I said, I got market feedback and I've since changed a couple of things, but we got it out. We threw it out there. We were never ready. It took me another 2 years to pay off the debt I incurred to actually do the comic book. And hey, it still was kind of worth it. It was now the first Zimbabwean action superhero kind of comic at that time. And that's well worth the trouble, I guess. So years later, as the idea stuck with me and I got another opportunity to re-attempt at all of this, I later renamed the comic, or renamed Gundog, to something a lot more African, a lot more local, which is Ganyamuto. And I created a brand new hero because I sat and I thought to myself, why do we have to continue to laud the Supermans and the Captain Americas, both of whom I truly love, but still do not represent us? And I created another character known as Gambanyika with his entire new characters, superhero team and all of that. They truly, truly, actually, I can say, started to look like me to some extent. I mean, yeah, many people have probably seen them by now. And yeah, the characters are actually more representative of myself as a person. So Gambanyika is, I guess, one of my more popular stories to date, even though he is fairly young. And I guess I want to make sure that you guys actually have a look and see what this guy is like. So that's Gambanyika right there. He's definitely one of my current more popular stories. And yeah, you can see he's a very proud African man, as far as I can define what that is. And definitely resonates a lot more with my audience and the people I guess I talk to. And since I launched this character and the revised Ganyamuto, I've got a lot more positive feedback from people who are being affected, not just seeing powerful superheroes, but heroes that actually reflect who they are. Even for me creating them, it's easier to tell their stories because I've truly lived that experience. And you'd be surprised to discover that so many other people in the world want to meet, to see themselves reflected in that, their identity, not even just their own personal stories, their identity is reflected the same way we need to. So I guess my last point with all of that, because this is like a rushed version of this, my presentation, but my last point of that is, I guess, to leave people with the idea that if we consciously, consciously deconstruct our media and place ourselves where we should be, with truth in our narratives, we will find that unstoppable force that will give the world more of what it needs, more of what it wants, and that is us. That is Africa. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell. That's my journey in a bit of a wrap. Oh yeah, Comexposed happened in all of that too. So yeah, I guess I'm
Is that
done.
what you call a nutshell? And that's
That's a
a
nutshell.
big
That's a
nutshell. That's a
nutshell.
big
I
nutshell.
mean, that's
That's
a
a big
nutshell.
nutshell.
I skipped so much in this. Like I skipped a lot.
It's
I
like you
skipped.
pressed I on the DSTV remote and it opened up your Wikipedia page. Yeah, no, that was quite insightful. Yes, very succinct. As we know, you've had a very long I don't want to say turbulent, that makes it seem dangerous. You've had a long and meandering career, right? You've dabbled in a lot, you've done a lot, lots of successes, a lot of growth points.
Yeah. So that's my journey in a nutshell.
That's your journey in a nutshell, and what a nutshell it is. I have lots of questions. I'll stick to the question that I had before all of this.
Okay.
No, because it's not that you said a lot. It's that some of the things that you said are very specific to a Zimbabwean narrative, and I think that's
Yeah.
key. I mean, you could say any of this anywhere, right? You could go give a talk in New York, Japan, and so on and so forth, and it's just an interesting tidbit. But I
Yeah.
think there is a value to seeing someone at a higher threshold than you, who you can aspire to, right? Because like for a lot of people, when you see a comic book artist, it's like, oh, Todd McFarlane or Jim Lee or Jorge Jimenez, right? The people who are literally at the top of the industry right now. And it's like, I can aspire to that, but I don't think I'll ever reach that, right? Because
Yeah.
we just don't have the infrastructure, connections, and so on and so forth. But if someone is 14, right now, and watching this, and they see you talk about this, they see another Zimbabwean man talk about this, that's different. That's different from Todd McFarlane talking about, I moved from Canada to the States to do comics. You hear there's something, I want to say lower, because that's the wrong word. There's something attainable about having people who have come before you. There's something that makes the journey seem less dark when there's people who have left footprints for you. It may not be like a treasure map, right? But you know that someone has done this before. That just makes it all the easier, you know?
True.
Like when someone has gone to the moon. Before someone went to the moon, it was just something that you say, to the moon and back. But now that someone has done it, it's like, we can go to the moon. It's a possibility for someone. So first and foremost, I want to thank you for the journey that you have gone on. It's certainly not been easy. You talked about, owing a bit of money. You talked about having to change your viewpoint. You've talked about having to make certain connections in order to further yourself. And obviously, within that nutshell, you've left off the sacrifices that you've made. No one likes to talk about the L's that they've taken and the losses that they've made. But they're there. They're there. So I guess maybe not for the 14-year-old, but maybe for 18 to 25-year-old, you find that many local comic books are trapped in a perpetual state of coming soon. And in your time creating content locally, what would you say is maybe there's more than one, what are the greatest hurdles to delivering work frequently and timelessly? Yeah.
Okay, that's a good question. I do talk at length about some of those things as well. And I did have to kind of leave them out of here, but I'm glad you've asked that. I'll start with, again, sort of like at the beginning, that first comic, the one that I did publish to the nation. Well, the rest have also been to the nation, just digitally, different forms. But that one, I had a Pentium 4 computer at the time, and Photoshop 7. Yeah, at that time.
7?
Photoshop 7.
7?
Yeah, I know.
Oh, not CS 7. Photoshop. Okay, I was about to be like,
you know? We weren't even there. We're now on CS what? 16, 15. I don't even know what we're on now. But
we moved from CCs to creative. No, we moved from CS to CC.
Yeah, we CS to CC. We're even on yes. So
Photoshop 7. Anyway, yes.
7. Hey, the first time I ever did color for a comic book, I used Microsoft Paint, but that's a different story. I didn't have a drawing tablet. So everything, I hand drew it, then I scanned it, and then I redrew it on the computer using a mouse. So I had to do all those lines and then use the erase tool to try and make them taper, and then eventually color and all of that. So it took me ages. But I couldn't wait to have the technology. One of the things a lot of young artists do is say, I don't have this, I don't have that, therefore I can't. I don't have Copic markers, so therefore I can't. I don't have this awesome quadra-core computer, so I can't do this. I don't have a Wacom tablet, so I can't. That is a big hurdle to people doing stuff, and for them to always be saying coming soon, because they're always waiting for circumstances to be ideal. In Zimbabwe, no one had printed a comic book like that at all. The printers did not know how to do it. I guess that's another part of the story I didn't include. Our printers were so eager to impress us with this comic book that they had never done, and they were learning how to do all those cool saturated colors and everything there, that they went all out. The side effect was that the comic book was so heavily saturated that we used to get comments back from readers saying they needed to read the comic and then take a moment to take a breath somewhere else, because reading it was making them dizzy. That's how many fumes were coming off of the pages, because these guys had gone all out. So that's just an example of, hey, later, to calm down. But my point is, you can't wait. You can't wait for things to be in place to actually try and do them. It just isn't going to happen. So that's one of those key points. And what's another hurdle? Yeah, money. Money is never even going to be there either. You can't even wait for that. Everyone's got it a bit easy now because it's we can publish digitally, which I didn't have at the time. So there you go. Next question. Did I answer that question?
You did. You did.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, sir. Don't let me interrupt you.
Well, repeat the question.
Repeat the question. It was like they had a preamble question, then there was the question. Basically, what I'm saying is that a lot of comic book creators say coming soon, and you've already answered part of it, or you had begun to answer it, saying just create, right? Don't wait until you have a particular type of technology. Don't wait until you have particular type of tools in industry standard. But now even the people, and I'm not shading anyone in particular, even the people who have those tools, right? Let's actually make a timeline, right? They don't have those tools, then they work to get the tools. Now that they have the tools, you still find people with the tools don't make that comic. It's still coming soon. What other things can you think of, maybe in your experience, that would stop someone from actually putting out a comic? And I know, like, there's life situations, you know, maybe your money needs to go in a particular place, maybe you're married, you just had a kid, maybe you're still in school, but, like, you know, ceteris paribus, what extra elements, right, that no one would think of, no one who hasn't made a comic, right? Because there's lots of things, it's like, having made a comic, what things, what secrets can you give to someone who just finds that they can't do their number one?
Well, I guess there's only one thing that really does stop, and I guess I hinted at it, but I didn't finish the whole thought. It's just fear. It's just fear, and the fear is fear of judgment. For the most part, it's fear of your judgment and the judgment of the world. Your judgment is fear of not meeting your own personal standard, what you have believed yourself to be able to do. And we all know the curve. Well, we don't all know, but there's the curve for people when they're getting into something new. They get in thinking they know everything and they're the best, and then the world kind of teaches them, they kind of dip and then rise a bit later. So it's that meeting your own expectations is the first fear. Then there's the fear of what the world is going to say once they see your work. The fear that they're going to tell you that your comic isn't as good as Batman. The fear that they're going to say that your heroes aren't engaging. Or the fear that they're going to say that, wow, this is trash. Those two things hold back, I think, all artists in all spheres. So there's something that you yourself, Bill, say quite frequently, which I fear a lot of our community don't really get 100%, but they are to some extent getting there, which is just make a bunch of bad comics. It's okay. Make a lot of nonsense, make a lot of trash. In fact, my first serialized comic book was actually called X Trash. And it was just the X-Men reimagined as trash. I was big into environmentalism. So I made a bunch of comics called SX Trash, and that was that. Good comics? I don't know. I don't think so. Not great comics, but I made them. And because I made them, Captain Wolf happened. And because Captain Wolf happened, Titan Co happened. Because Titan Co happened, Gundog happened. Because Gundog happened, Gambanyika happened. So if you just got to release, and that fear, you can only overcome it by getting into it. Everything else, family, friends, obligations, time management, all of that are literally excuses. Once you get over the fear, or once your desire outweighs your fear, those things you can take care of them. You wake up and draw comics at 4 a.m. if you don't have time. You ask your family to take a vacation somewhere to leave you alone for a bit if you really want to. If you're not feeling well, you'll go see the doctor and say, look, I need to draw, make me better. You will do whatever it takes once your desire overrides your fear. So yeah, I guess that's my point.
See, that was a powerful answer. I don't know what you were doing earlier. Listen, once your desire overrides your fear, you will be able to create under any circumstance. I think that's the takeaway from this. Yeah. And I think that's it doesn't matter what industry you're in, right? I know we're talking about comics and animation, but, like, you know, whether it's engineering, architecture, fashion, music, even accounting, right? Once you get over not being able to balance, you know, you will just do more and more and more until you learn how to do that, right? You can't get to quadratic formulas in O-level before you know how to add small numbers, right? Everybody wants to be able to do this amazing thing without doing the work.
You want to be Einstein before even doing any of the graphs.
Everyone wants to have that. It's not even about being Einstein. It's about having that Einstein clout, right? Because Einstein was a fool. You don't see in his posters. He's always got his tongue out. He's chilling. But, you know, the journey. Everyone wants the destination, but not the journey. And it's never easy. So again, thank you for, you know, telling us about it. A lot of creatives never. Not never. A lot of creators don't talk about what they do. It's just like, when you ask like someone who's already advanced, is like, hey, like, how did you get here? And they're just like, just draw. And it's like, how does that help me?
Yeah.
how does that, like, obviously we understand it. We get asked this question all the time. The answer is just draw, but it's not that simple, right?
I think another thing I'll add for the journey of an artist is submit to a sensei. It's so ironic that a lot of people, especially in our field, watch anime. And in almost every anime, particularly the shonen stuff, there's always a master and an apprentice. And the apprentice only gets better when they're now with the master. Even when they get to the level of the master ends up being their friend rather than somebody they just overtake and destroy. And it's, even though we get that lesson in anime and animations, we don't apply it to our lives. So I think artists out there, get somebody who literally has done the journey and then let them school you. Being schooled isn't fun, it isn't nice. When they say, oh, wash the window left and right, wipe left, wipe, when they say that, it may seem dumb and irrelevant, but for all we know, you're exercising your triceps and you draw for 12 hours or something. I don't know. But just do what they say. And you probably learn, because I'll tell you, as somebody who has had people learn from me or learn or come to me for lessons, my greatest desire is for you to not go through what I went through for the length of time I went through. If I can make my 8-year journey your 8-month journey, I'm really glad, because you don't have to do what I went. You just don't have to suffer that. But I also find a lot of guys are like, thanks for the advice. I think I got it. I'm going to go do it myself now. Then 6 months later, they come back and they're like, hey, can you still teach me? And I'm like, yeah, I will. We're just going to start at lesson 1, because I said I'll only teach you from lesson 1. They're like, oh, great, 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 great. Then they go again and come back another 6 months later. Can you teach me? And I'm like, as soon as you're willing to learn.
Just
So,
having a lot of bad days, hey?
yeah, 1 or 2.
um, I think a lot of the questions that you get asked, because I have watched a lot of your panels, I've watched your TED Talks, I've watched, you know, your presentations. I think a lot of the time it's very difficult to ask you very Zim comic book specific questions, because those people who are interviewing you don't work and live here, right? So I think the question that I would love to ask you, maybe people want to know, maybe people don't, but you know, they'll learn from this, is that why did you create the Comexposed WhatsApp group? What's its purpose? And have you seen any value from the community and the creators that have come from it specifically?
Okay. For those who are not aware, Comexposed has a WhatsApp group, several WhatsApp groups for gaming, for pros, for organizations, and for just general fandom. The groups predate the events. Comexposed itself is 7 years old, even though we've got 5 years of events. Those first 2 years were literally just Facebook and WhatsApp, developing the community. So what happened was that talking to Eugene, we decided we wanted to try make this Comexposed thing, but we didn't know anyone. We didn't know the fans out there. We just believed there were more people like us out there. So we forced all our students, because we were teaching at the time, to join this WhatsApp group or like not pass. So they joined, and within the group, we then made it mandatory for them to share work. So the idea was a lot of Zimbos doing work, but in silos. They're so scared to share their work and receive criticism or receive praise. They're just so frightened that they don't ever release anything, kind of like what we were mentioning before. But you need to develop that habit of as an artist of putting your stuff out there. So we wanted to make them share. And that was the point of the WhatsApp group. It was share in a very safe, moderated, um, comfortable environment where you are not going to be judged, where you're surrounded by peers or people who are learning like you, and where there are people who are interested in your development in that same group. That was the point of the WhatsApp group. It then grew to also be even more of a safe space because there are many groups, there are many art groups out there, there are many fandom groups, but we wanted one where someone who is 12 years old and someone who's 30 years old could still be in the same space, not be judged, and could share. They could glean something from each other. The young could meet the old, the young, the experienced, the inexperienced, the pros, the noobs, whichever. All of them kind of together in the same space, in a healthy space. So we also obviously instituted rules and guidelines to make sure that it tries to stay healthy, because artists, like I said, we're weird people, and it's easy for us to wander off in our conversations in less than amicable, lovely ways. So, to the question of whether or not I've seen great benefit in it, I would say it has benefited Comexposed and the Zimbabwean art community greatly. The people cultivated within that group are the ones who then proceeded to eventually exhibit and show their works. They have, some have shared with each other and met each other and learned to communicate with each other. Some collaborations have occurred, and we've even been able to create a home for people in specific niches through it. So I would say it has really benefited the community of artists in Zimbabwe. For us as Comexposed, it's benefited us in another way, as it's been great, can I say, data gathering. It's helped us understand the nature of the people more, better. So we've been able to tailor our offering as a convention, as an organization, to people a bit better. Sometimes we see the needs they don't see and we offer those. Sometimes we are corrected in what we're doing and we change accordingly. So it's been good in that kind of way. It's been good in giving us a way to engage other countries and our associates in other countries who want to know about the Zim industry. And then they, of course, are able to share with us how it goes in Nigeria or how it goes in Kenya or anywhere like that. So it's been very good in that way. I don't know if there are as many robust comic book centric chat groups across Africa as there are maybe in Zimbabwe, but I'd like to think we're probably one of the foremost in that area.
Okay, no, that was definitely an insightful and succinct answer. Within that, because this is a conversation, within that you spoke about data gathering and exhibition, right? So from my personal experience, I came into the comic book industry and I have no, professional art training. I didn't go to art school, anything like that. I came in with, gusto, and there was a lot of people who, did go to art school, did go to animation school, or some type of diplomacy. I don't think that's the way you use the word diplomacy. English came on a boat. So there's a lot of people who were skilled within the sphere of creativity, right? So it didn't have to be, animation, game dev, and any of the things that Comexposed champions. But when it came to exhibiting and talking and being on panels and actually putting your work or putting their work outside of Comexposed conventions and conversations in the WhatsApp group, it's now that jump step between being a creative, being a business person, and then eventually reaching an industry. We usually use the word industry very loosely because that's the term that it's an umbrella term that applies to productive organization. But I don't want to impose my own personal views on this because this is about you. What do you think about the gap between people who are very skilled in their field in terms of, creativity, their ability to income generate, and how we can collectively income generate and move towards the terminology of industry without feeling fake about it.
Broad question, interesting question. So the people with the gaps in their skill and how we can eventually create what is actually a real industry.
In Zimbabwe, because I mean, it's a general question. What I mean is, like, from what you've done throughout the, for those of you who don't know, that Comexposed used to host comic book days, not just the annual convention, but smaller events to gather interest and data. We see you. So within the local exhibiting and the people that you've interacted with, and maybe what you've seen from abroad, how can we make the jump from creative to business people or income generating people, and then eventually to an industry?
Okay. We're in a good time. We're in a good time where the connectivity of the world is such that our borders are not as significant a problem for us as they used to be. We can, for the most part, most of us can circumvent those. We can work remotely, where the whole world has had to do that recently. We can send our stuff, we can receive payment even remotely. It may be more difficult to remit stuff in Zimbabwe to actually get your monies this side. True, but it's not impossible. And I know a number of artists locally who are doing that. So I would say, well, there's so many ways of tackling that question.
There are, but think about how much time we have left in this conversation.
Okay. For any industry, industries are built of skill. And as you rightfully pointed out, we've got sort of a skill gap. We've got a higher percentage of novices this side, as opposed to professionals who can maybe carry an entire industry. Though every industry in the world was born of novices, it just happened that way. So I would say that the thing we need to move from one place to the next is to, it sounds cliche, but to just create content and get better as we create the content. The schools to teach us are not going to arrive quickly. And even if they did, they wouldn't charge us fees that we could pay. So it's a chicken and egg scenario in terms of, do the skills arrive first and then we call upon people to feed the industry, or do we feed the industry and then our skills develop as we go? I think the latter. I think we just need to churn stuff out there. People need to disregard their skill level, put stuff out, get better, and eventually we will be rewarded with the birth and creation of an industry, which will be birthed out of need to supply. The more people demand of us, the more we need to supply it. And at that point where there's a need to supply, you can talk to an investor and say, we need money to meet this demand. Before we can prove that, we can't get money, therefore we can't be paying wages, therefore we can't have an industry. It's kind of a weird mishmash of different directions that come together in an industry. But it does start with us producing first. And we produce at our sacrifice. At this stage in Africa, if you're getting into this business, this field, this area of expertise, and you do not expect to sacrifice, I say press eject right now and get out, because you need, this is a sacrifice time. This is not we're in the pioneer stage. We're in the stagecoach and wagon stage. There's no running water for 25 miles stage. We're in that point. We're in the get a saddle for your horse. There's no gasoline. There's no car to get you there stage. That's where we are. So if you're not willing to rough it, it's okay. There are many more established businesses you can get to. You can become a doctor. You can become a lawyer. You can do something else. But for us as artists, sacrifice today, put stuff out, learn as you go, and the reward over time will be eventually, we will be paid for what we're doing. The demand increases, and at that stage, you can start stating your worth and get paid accordingly. Long way around, but there's no short way through this.
There's no short way through. But if there was a short way through, let's say you had, you know, untapped funds. I don't want to say infinite because that's the wrong usage of the word infinite. Let's say you had untapped funds, right? What would you change if you could change one thing, right? Because that's I was about to make it too broad. If you could change one thing locally, could be anything, to push us forward, what would it be? One thing. I know it could be
One thing.
multi-tiered, but one thing.
I would fund or put money into a institution or school, or whatever you want to call it, for whom it would be mandatory to create content. So the school and the content creation will be one and the same. That way you're forcing the students to one, express themselves, create content, which you yourself are then going to sell out there. So there's a benefit for the school, but there's a benefit for the student, and you're creating stuff that the market is going to recognize more and more and more. The funding would be essential because in the first couple of years, you're going to make a lot of junk, but it will get better and eventually everyone wins. So something that learning from Comexposed, sometimes you have to force people to make. And if you give them that incentive that you ain't getting a grade until you make this film, and in this film, we're expecting wetter digital level of graphics, otherwise you're not getting anything above a C, you'll find that we'll start making things.
Okay.
But why the school would also need to be funded is because, you know, people may not be able to pay for all the fees in the beginning. Just saying.
True. No, I understand. Wow. Very insightful in terms of having institutions ready, because that's not something we have. I mean, we do have animation schools and we do have animated organizations, but in terms of comic books specifically, I know Comexposed is very general in terms of Converge, bringing together multiple fields. But there are available avenues for different tiers, I would say, different tiers of digital. But in terms of comic books per se, there's still, you know, it's still very a Popeye field.
Yeah.
Speaking of Popeyes, and I'd asked another creative this recently, and it's part of a paper that I'm writing. The word manga, right, is very country specific, and when you hear it, even the word anime, you can separate cartoon from anime. Someone is like, no, you're not watching a cartoon, you're watching anime. Even if it's the same level of silly, there's something very different about it. Do you think, rather, are you aware of a word that is locally centric, whether in Ndebele or in Shona, or any other dialect, that speaks to a description of what comic books are? And if not, or if so, do you think the presence of that word would change the marketing, either locally or internationally?
I'm not aware of a word that represents that. I have spent some time trying to make one or find one, construct one, because I do believe it would make a difference. More so locally than internationally, but eventually internationally, dependent on how much quality content we can churn out for that category, because we'd essentially be creating a category. Something interesting I heard today, whilst doing one of my many other things, which is nothing to do with my creative field, was that naming something, when you name something, it's the first way of giving it conformity, I guess. Naming it would actually categorize it and give it direction and give a lot of people an avenue to feed into. As long as it's not named, we're all just randomly doing something. I don't know. So it would be good to have the name. We call them Popeye, referring to anything that's a cartoon. And that, of course, derived from Popeye the Sailor Man, because that was one of the early cartoons that we saw here. I used to think that was maybe a bad thing, but now not so much. I'm not as hurt by it, because if we look at a lot of French words that derive from English and a lot of English words derive from French, it's okay for languages to share things from each other. This is just normal. So if we can't ever find one that was originally in our dialect, it's okay. If we can make one, that's better. It would be good. I know in Ethiopia, they have coined a term, and I'm very excited for that. I don't know if that term is going to spread across the whole of Africa or whether it will remain in their region. Either way, I'm not really bothered by it. Some of us look at manhwa and then we look at manga and we really can't tell the difference. Wow. Yeah, that may insult some people, but I'm just saying that to the layman, like the people who got into the Marvel Cinematic World, they do not know the difference between Jim Lee and Todd McFarlane. They wouldn't know. They have no idea. They just know, oh, Marvel Cinematic Universe, Captain America. They know that. So sometimes we can get stuck on terms when it may not always matter to whom we're talking to. So yeah, but if anyone out there can coin a really good term, I'm more than happy to adopt it.
It doesn't even have to be good. It just has to be ours.
It has to be out. Yeah.
I guess finding a term, exhibiting data collection, making an industry, your journey. The ultimate question is, we can't, and you had mentioned it before, we cannot work in silos, right? We can't, work in vacuums of islands of ourselves, right? It's great that there's one or two of us that are excelling, whether outside of the country or within the country. It's great that, we are having conversations about what to do, where we've been, where we are and where to go. But ultimately, a question that pops up a lot across Africa, it doesn't matter if it's Afro Comic Con Africa, and any other convention. I think one thing that always circles back to, which somehow I think it's the key to moving forward for all of us, is, can we collaborate? I have my reservations about it, but I'd love to hear what you think before we run out of time.
Okay, I do call for collaboration a lot. And at the same time, I struggle with it as well. Artists, the vast majority of them are perfectionists. So it's hard for them to share. It's hard for them to allow others to lay their hands on what they do. So collaboration is a real problem in Africa, but it also looks like it's literally the only way. We've all gotten into industries which demand collaboration. If you're animating, you're not going to make a feature-length film by yourself. If you're making a game, you're not going to make a AAA game by yourself. If you're making a comic, you just can't make consistently a serialized comic by yourself. If you want to go the Japanese way, yeah, you can, but you will sweat and you will have literally no life trying to do that. So most of what we do requires collaboration. And I think we have no choice but to figure out how to collaborate. Otherwise, it is going to come to naught. It is going to fall apart at the seams. We don't, there is no alternative. We have to, or this thing just won't work. It won't. I know one of the big stumbling blocks of collaboration is the ability to give reward, remuneration to the collaborators. I mentioned it before, we're in a period of sacrifice. So sacrifice or don't do it.
Sure, that was a threat. For anyone listening, that was a threat. Goodness, it was a threat, but it was definitely the truth. If you don't have an obsession about it, if you don't have the grand ambitions, like if you just want to do this, I mean, I don't want to shame hobbyists, right? I don't, because it's all fair and dandy if you just want to do it for fun. But if you're working with someone who has a much grander ambition than you, you are holding them back, or you're holding us back as the collective. There's lots more to say, definitely, about what we could do.
It's a conversation on its own, the whole thing.
Yeah, yes, it is. But do you have any closing words for anyone who wants to get into this, who knew nothing about this, or who wants to know more?
Ooh, closing words. Ooh, I have too many things to say to people, but
Hmm.
if art is a passion and this career choice is a passion, almost any creative career is a passion. You are gifted. The ability to create is not common. It's not everybody who can do this. That's why you can look at a creation, at a production, at a film, at a piece, and interpret things and be standing to someone who's not inclined that way and they see nothing but a splash of paint on a canvas. So it's not common what you have. What is common is doing nothing. Everybody can do that. So you just make a choice which way you want to go and how deeply you want to follow that passion of yours. You feel that passion, it will reward you. Um, and if you don't, you probably find yourself at the end of life just wishing you had and have another fuel because your passion was always your fuel. So do it because you've got no other choice. So yeah, those are my words. They may not mean much to
Amos,
lie.
no, 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 no. Those were those. Yeah, I felt it. I doing nothing is common. I'm going to tweet that right now. Um, thank you so much for your time, Tino. We know you're a busy person doing very, 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 very many things at all different types of levels. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for coming through. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your journey and your experience with us. This has been Comexposed Converge 2020 with Tinodiwa Zambe Makoni. We will have all the links to his details in the description below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this video. Drop down a comment below if you have a question for Tino, maybe about the industry at large or something that we may have missed. If you are a Zimbabwean creative, definitely let us know your thoughts on this discussion. Smash that subscribe button and hit that bell for notifications so you don't miss any of our other Converge videos. We're talking to a lot of creatives tonight. Today or whenever you're tuning into us. Thank you for stopping by. This has been Converge 2020. Catch you next year.